welcome back to the latest edition of Terrace Talk. The fixtures coming thick and fast for Norwich City at the moment, of course, the long trip to Cardiff on Saturday and then the trip to Hillsborough on Tuesday night. We are recording this prior to the trip to Cardiff. Fixture scheduling and how rapid the Championship is makes it very difficult to fit all of these in. But still looking forward to this game, of course, and with that, delighted to be joined by Sheffield Wednesday fan and podcast host James from the Wednesday Till I Die podcast. James, first and foremost, how are you feeling? I suppose, it's probably a lot more positive at Hillsborough so far this season, maybe than if you'd have gone back to this time at the start of last season when I spoke to you. And it was pretty grim reading. Danny Rowell had just arrived maybe, but quite the transformation at the end of last season. I mean, just talk me through last season and how positive that ended.
Yeah, I mean, this time last season, after 12 games, we were still searching for our first win. We're on to our second manager. It did come in game week 13 when we played Rotherham. And then, since then, it was still, people think it was all rosy, but, there was still a hell of a lot of defeats there. And it did obviously take us going to Sunderland on the final game of the season to actually secure victory. And you look at some of the results before and, beating West Brom on the penultimate game of the season. As it turned out, had we not beaten West Brom, we would have got relegated. I know obviously it doesn't always work out like that, but that was a vital win, and it was just more the shift in kind of the playing style, actually having an identity, playing out from the back, pressing high. I mean, things have changed a little bit since, but certainly when he came in, it was a breath of fresh air, and we actually just knew what he was trying to do, which you couldn't really say that for Xisco Munoz, really. I mean, we did have some heavy defeats. 6-0 against your nearest and dearest was a pretty tough one to take, given that we came up out of League One, just the season before. 4-0 against Southampton, 4-0 against Huddersfield. There was a 4-0 against Millwall. Some, like I said, some really big, heavy defeats there. But despite all those, everyone's just stuck by Danny Rowell. He's resonated with the fans. You see that in the celebrations whenever we've won a game. He goes over and claps all three sides of Hillsborough with the home fans in it, and same with the away following. Always respects us, speaks very well in the press conferences, which again couldn't be said about Xisco Munoz before. And I think last season, the way that it ended, I mean, I go back to Blackburn away, 7,000 Wednesdayites in that away end, beat them 3-1. And that was the first time, I think that was 4 games before the end of the season. That was the first time since the second week of the season that we'd actually got out of the bottom 3, which, we were winning games, but every time we won, it was always like the teams around us also won as well. When we lost, they lost, and it was just a bit of cat and mouse. The teams above us kept changing, but we were kind of consistent in 23rd for most of the season. So to come through the way that we did, and just all that positivity at the football club, which we had in the pre-season, the season before, and obviously that just all vanished somewhat. So it was good to get that back.
Yeah, 13th at the moment at the time of recording, prior to your game against Watford. 4 wins, 3 draws, 5 defeats. I mean, what have you made of the starts of the season? What the performance level's been like? I'd imagine still, mid-table, you'd take that probably at the end of the campaign.
Yeah, I said before the season, if we could finish 10th, then that would be a very, very good season. I mean, look, some fans got totally carried away. I'll include myself in that. Beating Plymouth 4-0 on the opening day of the season. It was a great pre-season in terms of, we've come up against some, really good opposition, but the football that we were playing was really exciting. It looked like it was actually working. One thing I would say about last season was perhaps, when you're coming in, with players that aren't yours and you're trying to implement a totally different style, it was working in some cases, but there was just lapses of concentration and giving away, conceding silly goals. Whereas in pre-season, it looked good. I'm not going to lie. And then when you win your first game 4-0, obviously you can only play the teams that are in front of you. It might have been that Plymouth wasn't quite up to it at the opening day of the season, because we then went to Sunderland buoyant and got beaten by the same scoreline. Then it was Leeds and we got beat 2-0. And to be fair, you take those defeats. I don't think our season is going to be defined by going to the Stadium of Light and beating Sunderland, who clearly they've carried on that form this season, so it wasn't a one-off. And then Leeds again. Leeds, as you found out last season in the playoffs, they're a decent side, and even though that was at home, you're still gonna struggle. The one that really hurt the most was Millwall, and it's funny actually because since that we've actually seen a change in formation. We've gone to a playing three centre backs, three centre backs with wing backs, which, funny enough, we finished the season playing that system. I don't think it's what Danny wants to play. I think he wants to play a 4-2-3-1, traditional, four defenders, but I think needs must. And when you lose 3 games heavily and not even scoring a goal in those 3 games either, he's actually seen that change is needed, and he's done that. And we have looked a lot better, and it's no coincidence that since then we have actually, not only have the results improved, but the performances as well, which I think at the early part of the season is perhaps a little bit more important than the results. You can win a game 1-0, but if you've been played off the park for the full 90 minutes, you get 3 points, but it doesn't really stand you in good stead for later on, in the season. And to be honest, we could have picked up more points than what we have. And it's been okay so far. I'm not getting too excited. We are mid-table, but it's very, very close there. I think with 3 or 4 points off the playoffs, but we're also that same number of points off the relegation as well. So let's not get too ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like the championship's quite settled so far this season. Lots of teams kind of grouped in that sort of mid-table to sort of playoff bracket. So intrigued to see how that all sets out in the next couple of weeks. You mentioned him there a few times, Danny Röhl. I mean, I'd imagine you've got nothing but positives to talk about when I mention his name. He signed a long-term deal in the summer. I'd imagine just tying him down in his future at Hillsborough, that must have felt pretty good.
Yeah, some people were saying that's probably the biggest bit of transfer news of the summer, really, tying him down to a new contract. He was still contracted until the end of this season, but still, you want him to, I suppose sometimes contracts don't mean a great deal, but the fact that he has tied himself down to a new deal, it is good. And there's so much praise about him. I know I've been speaking glowingly about him already. Look, I think it can still come under a bit of criticism for his, for his team choices sometimes, or the way that he's trying to play. I think sometimes it's been a bit naive against certain opposition. Certainly some of the defeats that I've already spoken about last season came from a point of just trying something that clearly wasn't working, and but he's still learning. It's his first managerial role. Obviously, I know he's been in the German national side as assistant to Hansi Flick, who's now at Barcelona. It was at Bayern Munich again, Hansi's assistant there. So he's got some decent pedigree behind him, and he's obviously been at some, fantastic clubs. But he's still learning. That is the main thing, and we have to appreciate that he's still learning the game, and there is going to be some mistakes, but he's got a lot of credit in the bank, so that's helping him somewhat.
We spoke quite positively there about stuff on the pitch. Off the pitch with Sheffield Wednesday, it always feels like there's something in terms of difficulties to speak around. And last night was probably more bad news for Sheffield Wednesday. Another embargo, no tax bill paid by the ownership. What do you make of kind of all the off the field stuff with Sheffield Wednesday? I'd imagine it's kind of that every cycle, every season, there's always something that's coming up.
Yeah, it's just really, really frustrating that, we're doing things on the pitch, things are looking great, and then off the pitch, it's just a bit of a circus, to be honest. This happened the same time last season, so, we didn't pay a tax bill then, so we are getting a little bit used to it, but it shouldn't be like this, to be honest. Like, we shouldn't have to be seen on the EFL website that the team under a transfer embargo. The transfer window's not open, so it doesn't really matter, and that's kind of the stance that the club's taking. But it doesn't really help that we've had points deductions before. That's why we dropped down into League One ultimately a few seasons ago, and just generally the mismanagement of the football club. It just doesn't sound great. Not other football clubs seem to be able to manage, and by all accounts, the club have come out and said that it's because of money owed to the chairman that he can't pay this bill, and it just screams cash flow problems. I couldn't believe how hand to mouth we actually are in terms of the running of the football club, that we're relying on a payment being paid to us so that we can pay our bills. I know ultimately that's how it works, but there's no cash reserves there to, you always get told to save money for a rainy day. I know we've had a lot of rainy days, but still there's got to be some money there. But I think it all comes down to the fact that he's been here 10 years. We've never moved any players on for any sort of money. Lucas Schwau is probably the only one that I can think of. He went for 5 million, but that's over a 10-year period. When you look at yourselves, selling players for 10, 15, 20 million here, there and everywhere, seeming on a regular occurrence and multiple times a season, that's why you can, all right, ultimately we're still in the same level, we're still at Championship, but that's why you're, looking to get back into the Premier League, and we're just happy with a mid-table finish and turning water into wine, which is only going to happen so many times. And yeah, it's just really frustrating. There was a lot of talk about getting the chairman out of the football club, but there's just a great sense of apathy amongst the fan base. He uses there's only so much that fans can do. There's only so many overinflated ticket prices that we have to buy, overinflated season tickets. I mean, the season tickets come out so early. They come out, they'll be coming out in, I don't know, a month's time for next season, which is not the norm. With you can also, well, you can't anymore, because we had a pre-order for a third shirt for next season that we haven't seen before either. So again, that screams, give me your money. And people buy them. Limited edition. Don't even know what it's going to look like. And then we had 10-year season tickets season before. Last season we had to pay in cash instead of paying on card fees. Honestly, I could go on for hours and hours talking about all the things that Chancery has done. And if your listeners want to hear about that, we will be talking about that this weekend, by the way, because we are going to be in great detail, because it's so infuriating.
There we go. Of course, we'll link all that good stuff down below, and we'll speak around James's podcast at the end and where you can find that. It may be mixed. I think Norwich fans that maybe didn't appreciate what Delia and Michael have done as owners, obviously limited budget and resource, just stepped down for Atanasios to step up. But I think it probably goes to show, that they've done a pretty good job, keeping this club afloat and competitive at, probably the top of the Championship and the bottom end of the Premier League for so long, 28 years, that's pretty impressive. Going back to Sheffield Wednesday, though, I mean, on the pitch stuff, who's the star man to look out for on Tuesday night? I mean, obviously, there's lots of key players that most Norwich fans and Championship fans will be aware of, the likes of Barry Bannon, who's, of course, been around for donkey's years these days, it feels like, and still providing that same level of quality. I mean, Masaba, I think we spoke around a little bit last time we spoke, and his qualities. I think you brought in Charles from Southampton, who seems to be doing relatively well from the bits I've seen. So is there any player you could pinpoint for Norwich fans to look out for? Yeah,
I am going to choose Shea Charles, but I'm also going to say this season it's been a bit of a strange one in that there's not really been many standout players. I mean, I suppose when you are mid-table, that's probably going to be a given, really. Some players do need to step up a little bit, but I think when we have had a decent performance, it's been more of a team performance rather than kind of individuals. But yeah, Shea Charles is... what a player. He's come in from Southampton. They signed him for 10 million last season from Man City, and you can see exactly why. He's a cut above everyone else. He's just so calm on the ball. It's unbelievable. He plays in that defensive midfield role, the number 6, if you want to be all, if you want to use all those technical terms that people use now. And he'll pick up the ball from the keeper. He'll play on the half turn. He doesn't mind it when he's being put under pressure. He can find a pass. His vision's great. I mean, he's not going to pick out a 30-40 yard diagonal, but he just knows where there's a man free, and he'll always find that player. He's got a goal as well. His first professional goal in his career. We haven't brought him in to do that, but that was a 1-on-1 which he finished nicely to win the game in injury time against Coventry at the CBS as well, which was good. Seeing him celebrate with his brother. His brother Pierce is the number 2 goalkeeper, which to be fair will probably be number 1 next season. But yeah, he is a cut above the rest. You mentioned Anthony Masaba there, and a little bit frustrated with him, to be honest. He finishes our leading goal scorer, which he only got 7 goals. So it wasn't exactly a scintillating season, but he's a player that shows a lot of promise. But kind of flatters to deceive and fails to deliver. I thought this season he was going to kick on. He is still a player to watch, because I think if he does play, very much like Jedi Kasama, they are very similar players, really quick, but they do have a tendency to hold on to the ball a little bit too much, which is a frustration. However, he will keep your fullbacks or your wing backs on the toes, and and keep them honest as well, because like I say, he will try and beat them every available opportunity. And another one, I suppose, is Deshaun Bernard, the Jamaican international that we've got. He came through the ranks at Man City, had a few loan spells at Hull and Portsmouth. We brought him in at the start of last season, only on a 1-year deal, and again he was one that we signed on another long-term deal at the back end of last season. He didn't actually sign initially. He wasn't even training with us. He had actually officially left, which again was a bit of a bizarre move. But he came in and we got the fanfares out and everything. With the news that he signed a new deal, he's just solid, solid centre back. Could score a few more goals if we're being honest. But I suppose you can say that about anyone. But he's one that he's comfortable on the ball. Doesn't mind picking the ball up from the goalkeeper. Again, very much like Shea Charles, just really, really cool, calm, collected, and he can put a tackle in. But it's mainly his ability in the air. His heading ability when crosses come in. He's probably one of the best at the football club for that at the moment.
Yeah, I'm sure Norwich's defenders will be aware of that on Tuesday night. In terms of Hillsborough, what kind of the home support been like so far this season? I mean, we saw it maybe last campaign when we went there and you pulled it back from 2-0 down to pick up 2-2 draw. And I mean, that felt like the atmosphere that night was pretty positive and rocking. And I think when that place gets going, it's really tough to go there as an opposition team. But 2 wins, 2 draws, 2 defeats at home so far this season. What's the atmosphere? What's the feeling been like at home?
You know what? It's always strange at Hillsborough because all the managers come and say, "Oh, we're going to silence the crowd and this, that, and the other." I think the atmosphere could be a lot better than what it actually is. Having said that, there has been some fantastic days there. We only have to go back to the Peterborough game, which obviously every football fan knows what happened there, and that was a night that'll live long in the memory. But I do feel like Hillsborough has to be full for it to be like that, and whenever we have had decent atmospheres, it's always been when we've been the underdog. You look at Newcastle in the FA Cup when we beat them at Hillsborough. You go back even a little bit further, Arsenal in the League Cup when we beat them in the 4th round. That was an epic night. But again, it was full. It was the underdog. Peterborough game as well. That was exactly the same scenario for that to happen. Look, if we're winning, it's always buoyant. I think there's still that sense of expectation around the football club. I think some of the older generation still feel that we are a big club. The word massive gets used quite a lot, sometimes a bit tongue in cheek, but it gets used by the wider media as well. And I think we have to realise that we haven't been in the Premier League since 1999 now, which is a long time. And yeah, some people think we still should be there, which, I think we should temper his expectations a little bit and realise that we're probably realistically a lower end championship club right at this moment in time. And then perhaps the atmosphere might be a little bit better. But yeah, if we get an early goal and we've got something to cheer about, then yeah, it can be a special place at times.
Yeah, before we talk about the game, I'm intrigued to get your sort of thoughts on Norwich. I know when we spoke on your podcast, you maybe hadn't even heard of our manager, so I'd imagine maybe it's maybe comes a little bit of surprise as to who it is and what's happening at Carrow Road. But what you sort of expected from Norwich on Tuesday night? I mean, sort of, as I spoke around on your channels, the football's changed quite dramatically. Are you expecting to see a different team to that you faced last campaign?
Yeah, when I think of Norwich, I always think of the side that gets promoted and then gets relegated from the Premier League. That's what happened for quite some seasons, and it's I was a bit. It wasn't last season or the season before. I think the season before you had a pretty of a poor season. So pleased to see that Norwich picked it up a little bit, and got themselves into the playoffs, because that's where I see Norwich. I don't see Norwich as a mid-table side. I do see it as certainly up there. I mean, Borja Sainz is one player that just kind of stands out, and if you fancy a flutter, I suppose having him as an anytime goal scorer is pretty much a given. You had Josh Sargent that was kind of like that last season, and now even though he's still there, you've replaced him with someone else. So yeah, Norwich always a team where there's lots of goals, and I suppose as a neutral, just an exciting watch. I mean, yeah, if you're going to pick if Wednesday aren't playing, you pick a game to watch, I suppose it would have to be Norwich, really. And yeah, I've been pleasantly surprised from the little bits that I've seen. I probably did expect you to be a little bit higher than what you are. I know you've had lots of draws at the moment, perhaps turn them into wins. But as we were talking about on our pod, those draws have come from behind. So obviously a very difficult team to beat, and yeah, it's going to be a difficult test on Tuesday, even if our mind might be elsewhere, looking at a game in the future.
And that was exactly what I was going to touch upon. You've got a game on the horizon against the other side of Sheffield. I won't swear to you on this channel. Norwich kind of had it last season when we spoke. I think we went to Portman Road the game after we played you at Carrow Road, and we sort of had the hangover a little bit when we came to Hillsborough from the game on the weekend where we beat them, and continued that sort of long unbeaten run, which of course we still like to gloat around a little bit. 15 years or so now since they last beat us, and enjoying their great ride so far in the Premier League. But anyway, back to Sheffield Wednesday. I mean, what do you sort of feel this game is going to be in terms of an approach from Danny Roll, from the players? Is it going to be kind of not getting yourselves injured, not maybe exerting too much energy into this game with the kind of big game, I suppose, on the weekend?
As a fan, I wouldn't mind if we played the under-18s on Tuesday against Norwich, if that meant that everyone was fully fit for the Steel City derby at the weekend. It is at Bramall Lane, of course. I don't think Danny Röhl is going to be approaching the game like that, to be honest. He'll be cliche, won't it? We'll be on the look at the next game. We've only got eyes on the next one and everything else, which is totally understandable. You've got to pick up your points whenever you can, and even though it's against Norwich, there's more chance of picking up points at home statistically than there is away. It's just a given. But yeah, I think Danny Röhl does like to rotate his squad. It's funny because I looked at the numbers and I thought that we'd used quite a lot of players so far this season, which we have in terms of a starting sense. However, there's other clubs that have used more in terms of bringing them off. Used less in a starting 11, but brought more different players off the bench. But yeah, we rotate the squad constantly. We had a cup game against Brentford just last gone, drew 1-1, lost on penalties, which is frustrating, but we made 9 changes from the side that played in the league. So he's obviously keeping players fresh for the league games. I think we made 3 or 4 changes for the Portsmouth game, the last league game that we had. And I think if you look at the last 3 league games, the front 3, we've played 8 different players in those positions. So, that's, do the maths. That's only one player that's played 2 of those games from a starting position. So, yeah, I expect a lot of changes again. Probably going back to more the starting lineup that played against Portsmouth. Obviously, they would have had a week off. But obviously, as we record this, we are playing Watford at the weekend. So ultimately, I have no idea what's going to happen. Like I said, we've one eye on the fans have certainly got one eye on the Steel City derby. I'm sure Danny Röhl will remain professional and be just looking to this game in isolation.
And with that, intrigued to see how you think this game's going to go and push you for a score prediction. I mean, we sort of mentioned over on your channel the amount of goals that seems to flow in between us two when we play each other. I mean, last season there was the 2-2 draw, the 3-1 Norwich win. There's been 5-1s at Hillsborough to Sheffield Wednesday, a 4-0 Norwich win at Hillsborough, and plenty of goals. I think Norwich are unbeaten in the last 6, 4 wins, 2 draws. So maybe a positive fixture for us in terms of recent history, but always one that I sort of fear the worst, given those records that, as I mentioned, the 5-1 defeats at your place. So with all that and all the context, how do you see the game going and a score prediction?
Yeah, when I always think about this game, I always think about Dion Dublin's final league game. That was a 4-1 win, I think, back in 2008. That's always one that stands in my mind. This fixture seems to always be a last game of the season fixture as well, weirdly enough, but obviously not this time. I don't think it's going to be 4-1 or a 5-1 to Sheffield Wednesday, as much as I would love that. I think, realistically, I'm going to give you 2. I'm going to go with my head and my heart. I can't come on here and tell you that Norwich are going to beat Sheffield Wednesday. I just can't bring myself to do that. But my heart is saying that we're going to nick a 1-0 win. I think my head is probably going to say you might have a little bit too much for us. Your free flowing scoring team. It might finish 2-1 to Norwich. That's what my head's saying anyway.
No, that's completely fair. So I've had a few people in recent weeks, given that Norwich are a little bit unpredictable as to what way they might go and what way they might play as to the way the game might go. And I think that's probably a pretty fair assessment. And with that, before we round off, James, just want to plug your guys' podcast where Norwich Sheffield Wednesday fans can find the content. Obviously, depending on this game, it might depend on who wants to go and listen to your guys' content.
Yeah, so it's the Wednesday Till I Die podcast. So you can find us on all the major podcasting platforms and on YouTube as well, or on the socials. It's at WTRD Pod. We do what we call the debate show on a Wednesday evening, which I'm sure will be heavily focused on the Steel City derby at the weekend after. However, we will obviously be talking about this game. So yeah, you can find us on YouTube live at 8:00 on Wednesday.
There we go. We'll link all that good stuff down below. James, do really appreciate your time coming on the show as usual. Great to catch up with you ahead of this game. Of course, always a classic encounter when these two meet. So hopefully we get another one on Tuesday night when Norwich City make another long trip, this time to Sheffield.